what are the cons of actually using a buyer's agent? And I guess the first one's obvious, Ben.
That's right, Bryce. I mean, ultimately, the number one thing is cost, right? And so when you're thinking about the value equation, what you're talking about is value is equal to benefit over cost. And in this particular case, this is why most people might choose not to necessarily use a buyer's agent. And it could be for a couple of reasons. I mean, ultimately, they've got a budget. And having that budget, and they're thinking, well, if the buyer's agent fee is going to be 20 grand, I could have potentially put that $20,000 into buying that property. And it might have got me a better property, or I might have been able to use that as negotiation. So I can understand why people might think initially in that way. But, you know, when once they take the irrational element out of that and that emotional element out, the concept is really, really simple in the sense that, you know, what is the value, the benefit that I'm getting over the investment that I'm making? And I think that that's an important one. But they charge a fee. It's, as I said, it's flat or a percentage of the purchase price. Now, if they've got those razor-thin budgets, then that might reduce their stretch. But that's ultimately what you've got to do, is you've got to weigh out that cost against the saving or potentially the future gain that you're going to make. But that's the first con that most people need to get past before they consider using a buyer's agent.
And it goes back to what you said last week around, Ben, how, you know, what if your mate's in the pub says, what do you need one for? Like, it's like, that's yep. One of the biggest ones to overcome. So for us, we get it. We get it. And hopefully for all the reasons we talked about, you can see the benefit. Second one is something that Jason Vella would corroborate with us, Ben, is that trust matters, right? So if you're not inspecting the property yourself, like it could be interstate or you're overseas or time poor or whatever, you're heavily relying on someone else's judgment. And therefore, the trust component becomes non-negotiable, but you have to do your homework on who you're working with, right? And so we obviously dedicated a whole episode around this, and you know, what was it? Moldy eaves, burnt out vans. There was a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't disclosed to Jason in that experience that he had, and he disclosed that it was a, you know, from his perception, it was a top tier buyer's agent. So this is really important, and you have to get to work on doing your homework on who you're working with. And that's really the art of being able to select the right person. How do you know if there's someone to be trusted?
So the reality is that, like in any industry or professional, certain people have great skills, certain people have elite skills, others have general skills. And so the industry like we're in, there is going to be people who are rookies. There's going to be people who are absolute rock stars in terms of the way in which they go about it. Now, part of your investigation in terms of if they aren't created equal, what are you getting around the sum of the parts is my point that I like to think about here. What sort of training and qualifications have they gone through? Because the reality is, to create a Roger Federer, as an example, he had at least a dozen coaches to be the best of his craft. And I suspect that's going to be the same. So when you are thinking about not all buyers agents are created equal, you then need to say, well, okay, if I am going to consider a rookie, or if I'm going to consider a business that's done only a couple of hundred purchases versus a business that's done over 4,000 purchases, what is the reviews? What is the information from the street saying? But also internally, what value are they stacking up as part of that particular story, right?
Not all buyers agents are created equal, Ben, and if they are charging a low fee, and to give you, for $1 million, you're probably paying $15,000 to $20,000. For $2 million, you're probably paying $30,000 to $50,000, right? So if they're well outside of that, have a little look under the bonnet. Why?